Now, as I was preparing my thought for tonight, there were many things I could have spoken on. One of the top contenders was Samuel. However, I had a bit of an issue there. I thought, what can I say? Awesome, amazing, great. There's not much else I could say. By the way, in case you didn't know, my name's Samuel, so thank you. But as you've seen from our reading tonight, I've decided to speak on Moses. But not just Moses. 3 different events that happened in his life. And 3 different areas of God. Those 3 areas are God's will, God's orders, and God's timing. 3 different aspects of God. And each one of these are important to Christian life. And to demonstrate each one, we're going to be looking at the life of Moses and God's plan in it. I've entitled my first section tonight, God's Orders. Firstly, we need to set the scene. The children of Israel had been in Egypt for 430 years, ever since the days of Joseph. Over those years, many pharaohs came and went, each one forgetting God and his people. Moses was sent by God to demand that Pharaoh let the Israelites go. However, every time that Moses spoke to Pharaoh, the oppression and affliction upon the Israelites was only made worse. One by one, plagues came against the land of Egypt and the Egyptians. We read of this happening in Exodus chapter 7 to 13. And I was going to choose that as our reading tonight, but I wasn't sure how many of you want us to read 6 chapters. So I'm just going to go over that in a little bit of detail now. To the untrained eye, it may seem like the whole situation is getting worse. The Israelites are only being made to work harder and harder. The country is under the effects of many devastating plagues. And still, the Israelites are not being released. However, when you're following God's orders, all things work together for good. We're reminded of this truth in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And it says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God." And just a couple of weeks ago on the subject of Sunday school memory verses, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had that as our memory verse in Sunday school. And what an amazing truth it is. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God. Something else that is shown to us in this situation is God's separation. God separated the Israelites from the Egyptians. He separated the oppressor from the oppressed. He separated his people from the world's. During the 5th plague, all Egyptian cattle were infected and died. However, all of the Israelites' cattle was not infected and did not die. God had drawn a clear line for all to see. Continuing, during the plague of darkness, the Bible states, "They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings." Notice there is once again a distinction made between the Israelites and the Egyptians. While the Egyptians were blind, the Israelites could see. The final plague was the death of all firstborn. This includes both people and animals. God once again put a difference between the Israelites and the Egyptians. However, this time, the Israelites would have to do something to identify with him. They would have to kill a lamb without blemish, take its blood and put it upon the doorpost of the house, both left, right, and above. They covered their houses with the blood of the Lamb. The Lord said, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where we are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt." There's an important part there that I really noticed. It says, "I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." Judgment was executed that night, but the Lord passed over all of those with the blood upon their house, those who identified with him. God ensured he showed separation, not just in these 3 plagues that I've mentioned, but in all of them. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh let the people go, both them, their flocks, and herds. Now this leads perfectly onto my second point tonight, and this is God's will. They'd escaped victory, or so they thought. The next roadblock was one they were not expecting. After being released from Egypt, they set out en route to the promised land. Shortly after, however, Pharaoh changed his mind. He decided that if he couldn't have them, then no one would. Pharaoh's entire army was sent after them, as we've heard tonight. Now, by this time, the Israelites had reached the Red Sea. A vast area of water stood before them, and Pharaoh's army stood behind them, quickly closing the gap. People often say that when you're in God's will, then all is well. You will have no problems, worries, concerns, fears, or needs. In contrast, however, we as Christians often find ourselves in the opposite situation, where we are in God's will, but yet we seem to be facing the enemy head on. And this was the case for the Israelites. God had instructed Moses to lead them out of the land of Egypt and toward the Red Sea. And now that they had gotten there, all seemed to be going wrong. We see this happening in Exodus chapter 14. In the mind of the Israelites, all that stood before them was certain death. Chapter 14 says, "And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord, and they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians and to die in the wilderness." But when you're in God's will and in God's hand, you are safe. And now that all seemed impossible for the Israelites in their situation, as far as they were concerned, there was nowhere out. Now that all seemed impossible, God was ready to show himself. Who can relate to what the Israelites were feeling? Being in a situation where you can see no escape, no way out. All that stands before you is a certain ending, a certain answer. If we read on, we see that God instructed Moses to go up to the Red Sea and hold his rod over the waters. This was the same rod that turned into a serpent. This was the same rod that turned the river into blood and would later provide water out of a rock. As Moses followed God's orders, the Israelites, in a state of complete confusion, but more importantly, Moses was in a state of complete trust and faith. The impossible happened. The Red Sea parted. The waters rose up on each side as two high walls. The ground below was revealed, flat and dry, as a path for the Israelites to walk on. And one by one, they walked across to the other side. And once all was safe, the walls of water came crashing down, killing all of Pharaoh's army. They were safe. God had proved himself once more. I have spoken on God's orders and God's will, but now is arguably one that most people forget. God's orders, people often remember. God's will, people often remember. But this last point is something that most people forget. Or if they do remember it, they choose to ignore it. And that is God's timing. Surely you would think, after all that had happened for the Israelites, and all that God had done for them so far, how he had rescued them from the hand of Pharaoh, brought them out of Egypt, and now across the Red Sea, they would have tremendous faith in him and his ways. However, sadly, that was not the case. They had reached Mount Sinai. God had instructed Moses to climb the mountain alone and receive from him the 10 Commandments. We all know what the 10 Commandments are. These were the 10 Commandments that would guide the Israelites' lives to be pleasing to him, as well as the many laws that would govern them. Now the Israelites, being their impatient, untrusting, rebellious selves, could not wait for Moses to return and for God's commandments to be told them. Day after day they complained to Aaron, Moses' brother, saying, "Make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him." And as these days turned into weeks, Aaron gave in. He'd had enough and he gave in to the people. We read of this happening in Exodus chapter 32, verses 2 to 4. And it says, "And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron, and he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." After all that God had done for him, how he brought them over the Red Sea, out of captivity in Egypt, that was how quickly they turned and decided that they wanted nothing to do with him. Then God informed Moses of the situation down below. Moses was still up on the mountain. God informed him of the lack of leadership and faith shown by Aaron. And after 40 long days and 40 long nights, Moses began his descent back down the mountain. This time, however, with 2 tablets of stone, carved by God's own finger, carrying the 10 Commandments. Do you know what Aaron's excuse was when Moses reached the bottom? In chapter 32, verse 24, we read it, and it says, "And I said unto them, Whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire. And there came out this calf." And I'm not sure about you, but I can say, what nonsense is that? The next time you go into a jeweller's and you ask about the price of a ring or a Rolex, for example, and they say to you that it is many thousand due to the craftsmanship involved. I'm not sure how many of you know, but I like Apple, and their computers can go up to many tens of thousands of pounds. And what's their excuse? It's cutting edge technology. The amount of engineers we have working on this, making it out of the highest grade materials, that's what gives it a cost. But no, you can tell them now. You simply melt the metals and melt the gold, and they form themselves into the designs. You as the jeweler do nothing. All those ads you see of people so carefully putting on the finishing touches of rings and other items, it's all a conspiracy. After all, we have it on good authority from Aaron that you simply cast it in and the calf jumps out. We read of what happened when Moses reached the bottom. Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said unto them, "Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out, from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbour." And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And there fell of that people that day about 3,000 men. That day, many thousands of people died, and all because of one reason: impatience. This is a theme in the Israelites as a nation, as many times their impatience in God's timing not only ended up delaying the great things that God had planned for them, but causing unnecessary hardship along the way. So what can we take away from this event? That patience in God's timing is needed. Now, I have spoken on separation. Separation between the Egyptians and the Israelites. Separation of the waters. Separation between Pharaoh's army and the Israelites. Separation between man's timing and God's. But most importantly, over all of these is the separation of God's people and the world's. You are either for God or against him. We read this in Matthew chapter 12, verse 30, which clearly says, "He that is not with me is against me." And tonight we have this decision to make. Are we for God or against him? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Furthermore, in John chapter 14, verse 6, it says, "Thus Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." Jesus came in all his glory and in all his might as a little baby. He lived on earth among the sin and evil, and he died on the cross to save us. To save us from our sin. He took our sin. He had done no wrong, and yet he died to save us, both me and you. But soon, Jesus is coming back. No longer as a baby, but as a king. No longer as the judged, but as the judge. And once again, a line will be drawn between his people and the world's. Those who are not with him are headed to a lost eternity in hell. Jesus was our lamb without blemish. He was our sacrifice so that judgment could pass over us. And Jesus offers each one here tonight the choice to stand with him or not. The question he asks is, will you? Amen. Amen.